If you have played Anthem, then odds are that you have seen this mysterious language which you can see at different places around in Tarsis. At first I didn't think much about it, I thought it was just gibberish, but then after seeing it in a few different places I decided that hey, maybe I should look into it a little bit and maybe even decipher it. After all, I do like written languages and I also do like a challenge. So I had a look into some of the notes on the notice board, and at first glance, this is what I learned from it. First of all, it looks as if it is written from left to right, and I make that assumption because all the text they align on the left side, and this must be where it is written from. Secondly, there are spaces between words, and this tells us a few things. One of which being that this is likely not a logogram, meaning that each sign has its own unique meaning, and you see this in Chinese Hanzi. If each word has its own meaning, that would eliminate the need for spaces. We can also see that words have a length between 2 and 11 signs, and this basically eliminates the possibility of this being a syllabary language, meaning that each sign represents a syllable, and that is typically a vowel and a consonant. You see this in Japanese katakana and hiragana. And I chose to eliminate this because an 11-syllable word is a little bit overkill. Now by looking at the signs themselves, I can see that this sign, for example, it repeats itself several times throughout the text and sometimes even twice in a row, which eliminates the possibility of this being an alpha-syllabary, which means that the language is composed only of consonants which then change shape or shapes are added to them depending on which vowel is added to that consonant, and you see this in Thai language and even in Elvish from Lord of the Rings. It also means that there are no apostrophes or umlauts, which just makes it easier to decipher. And this means the language is not composed of syllabic blocks where each sign is a combination of other signs. You see this in Korean Hangul. Next up, by looking at the first character, we can see that that is actually the same as the last one. And that means that there don't seem to be any upper or lower case words. And in general, that means that there are no contextual letter forms. And that is when the letter they change shape depending on where it is located. For example, in Arabic and traditional Mongolian, the first, middle and last character, it looks different even though it is the same character. And all this just means it is gonna be much easier if we want to decipher it. Punctuations are normal ones. I know I shouldn't use the word normal, but you know what I mean. Question mark, exclamation mark, and so on. And this just means that all these signs should actually be letters and there are no hidden surprises where one of them is actually like a full stop or something like that. Again, easier to decipher. By counting different signs in the first note, I noticed 18 different ones, and then 3 additional ones on the second note that I read, and on the third note I found 1 more, making this a total of 22 different signs. We shouldn't expect this to be every single sign, but we can assume that it is something close to this. Comparing this to known existing languages, we find that it is very close to the Latin alphabet, you know, in English, which has 26 letters. So it's probably English. Okay, so summarizing everything we know. First off, we know that it is an unknown language, which means we cannot make the assumption that it is English, even though it probably is. Second off, it is written from left to right, which means that is the order we're going to decipher it in. There are no hidden punctuations, so every single sign should be an actual letter. Also, I make the assumption that this is the Latin alphabet, and with this in mind, I want to get started on deciphering it. The first thing I did was to pick a random note and then highlight all the different signs and give them a random number. The number doesn't matter, and you can see that I even screwed up the order here and I missed number 13, but that's not important. And then I converted everything into an Excel spreadsheet. So all the unknown letters are marked with gray and by the number that I have assigned to it. So this is going to be a little bit like Wheel of Fortune. Do you remember that game show? That is the design that I was inspired by. And the next step is to fill out all the blank spots. And since I don't know anything, this is going to be a little bit difficult, but I looked at this note here in the bottom. It's like it is signed by someone. And who might have signed a note which is hanging on the contract board? I wonder if it is the guy who is responsible for the contracts. Maybe this is signed by Yarrow? But there's just one slight problem about this hypothesis, and that is that Yarrow is a 6-character word and there's only room for 5. But that's not gonna stop me. This is too much of a coincidence, and this has got to be it. So I assume that Yarrow with a W is the English spelling of his actual name, and that his name in his original language, which must be what this language is spelled differently. This is not unheard of at all. For example, Jackie Chan, who I am sure you have heard about, his actual name is not Chan, it is Chung. And the same goes for the most common Korean surnames, Park and Lee, which are actually Bak and E. So I'm gonna make the assumption that the last word is just O and not OW. So I'm gonna put that into the blanks, and now we are getting somewhere. I have already given all the signs a number, so any sign that is next to a number of 19, 12, 9 and 1, I now have an idea of what letter that might actually be. And now my spreadsheet is filled with Y, A, R and O's, but I still cannot see any words, so I have to guess the meaning of some of the other signs as well. I am still not sure if this language is even English, so I cannot just guess English words. So I decided to guess some of the words that I imagine would be in this universe, and that is names. I'm thinking something like Dominion, Cypher, Freelancer, and Tarsis. And I was actually pretty lucky. In the first note, which also contains Yarrow's signature, there is a word that actually matches the description of Tarsis. And I can now add T, S and I to my sheet. I chose to add them in a different color. If I find out, for example, that my assumption here is wrong, then I can always just go and revert back to before I made this assumption. But I gotta admit, you guys, I was a little bit stuck right here because I still did not find any known words, and I still do not know what language this is even in, and I did not find any of my other suggested words at all, so I decided to look into another note to see if there was any luck there. But I still did not see any words that I knew about. But then after looking over it for a couple of minutes, it actually struck me. It was in the first note all along, and it was one of my suggested words even. The word freelancers, with an S in the end. You see, I overlooked this one because I only looked for words with 10 letters. And this one has 11. And this was a big help because now I have a lot of new letters, and now this whole text is beginning to make sense finally. And it turned out that it was Latin, with one English word being freelancer so far. And the next step is really simple. It is just to look for Latin words and then just fill in the blanks. I was lucky on the next one because there's only one vowel left, and in some cases you absolutely need a vowel, so I know where to put the U now. And having very limited knowledge of Latin, I still do know that there is an ending that is common in Latin, which is UM, so I think I can fill out the M's now. And now it was just a simple question of looking up Latin words on Google Translate and then see whichever remaining letters would make sense in the context. So this is what the first letter actually means, and that translates to something along the line of all freelancers, for the sake of Tarsis, please remove the trash. Yarrow. The second one made less sense. Google Translate was able to translate every single word, so it is probably correct, but I don't know if it's Google Translate or the person who wrote it that is wrong, but this is what it came up with. It looks like a complaint about sound and maybe also a stench, so maybe that has something to do with the person who's leaving out trash around Tarsis, right? And the final note also didn't make too much sense, but this is what it came up with. So all in all, this was a fun challenge. I was a little disappointed that it is just a direct translation of A, B and C's, but anyway, it was still an interesting journey. So if you know Latin and you can tell me what this actually means, I would very much like to see that in the comment section. So thank you very much for that if you can help me out there. And thank you very much for watching. I hope I see you next time.